A low, guttural, tongue-flapping noise is the 19th episode of the second season of Two and a Half Men. This is directed by Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode and share some thoughts. And to be perfectly honest, I found this to be really boring. I didn't find it funny. It definitely relies, in my opinion at least, on the gimmick of Alan wearing an eye patch, and I will talk more about that in a moment. But there wasn't really anything in this that I found entertaining. However, there is something in this that has stuck in my head for 10 plus years, for more than a decade. Probably closer to 15 years almost. And I will talk about that as well. So while I didn't love the episode, there is something in this that really stuck with me. And I don't know if I always didn't like this episode, but compared to a lot of the recent episodes at least, I just didn't think it was very funny. It starts off with a bit of a mystery. And Alan and Charlie are in the coffee shop. We learn that Charlie had taken Alan to the eye doctor, and Alan is wearing an eye patch, and he wears an eye patch throughout this, and we find out that it's because he took a piece of toast to the eye. I kind of feel like that couldn't do that much damage, but I don't know how thin the toast was sliced or how sharp the corners were. It does seem a bit extreme, but nevertheless, they're in the coffee shop, and then Alan starts talking to a woman called Sherri, played by Jeri Ryan. And this is actually somebody Charlie has previously dated. This doesn't deter Alan. And he has a conversation with her and they're going to go out on a date and he's really happy. And it is nice to see Alan happy throughout this episode. And the bit that has stuck with me since watching this for the first time is when he walks into the house with Charlie after they've been to the coffee shop and he's singing Sherri by the Four Seasons. And Jon Cryer's vocal performance there is brilliant. And I'm not exaggerating when I say every time I've heard the name Sherri, read the name Sherri, or even read the drink Sherri, I've heard it in Alan's voice for the last probably almost 1.5 decades. So that's pretty powerful. That's definitely very, very impressive. And I'm sure that that's how I will hear it for the rest of my life. And I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. Alan then begins to worry that Sherri will compare him to Charlie. Nevertheless, he goes on the date with her. The scene at the restaurant's not too bad. Sherri definitely seems like a really likeable character. And Alan goes out with her and he tries to comfort Jake before that, saying she's not replacing your mother. And Jake doesn't care. He just wants to know if you can blind somebody with a piece of bacon, I believe it was. I didn't write it down, but certainly Jake was more interested in how meat can damage the eyes. And Alan goes to the restaurant. He falls off of the chair. Oh, this is after he greets her at the door and kisses her immediately. A little bit full on, but clearly he's very excited about this, and things seem to be going really well. They go back to Sherri's, and unfortunately Alan cannot get Charlie out of his mind. And I think there's a pretty good message here. Don't enter into a relationship with somebody your sibling's already been with. There are exceptions. It might work for some people, but I think generally speaking, especially if your brother is Charlie Harper, you're always going to be worrying if that person's thinking of them, comparing you to them, and I think it's just easier to not proceed with that. And that's basically all that happens. I didn't really find any of this funny. The narrative honestly isn't the most interesting either. I do think it completely relied on Alan wearing the eye patch and turning it into a gimmick, and I found that kind of boring. What I will say is if that somebody were to tell me that Jon Cryer actually needed to wear an eye patch for whatever reason, damage to his eye, I'd assume, then, and they wrote it into the story, then I'd think, okay, fair enough. But if they made the decision to focus on this and just turn it into a bit of a gimmick, well, I guess also having a slightly meaningful discussion about whether one should enter into a relationship with somebody their sibling has been with, I don't think it's well constructed. I don't think it's very interesting. I feel like everything that happens in this episode could have been condensed into half an episode. There's not a lot going on there, and I didn't find pretty much any of it funny. But Jon Cryer singing Sherri, as I said, has lived in my head for the best part of 1.5 decades, and I'm sure it will continue to be there. So, memorable, if not the most enjoyable. Needless to say, a low guttural tongue-flapping noise is not my favourite episode. If other people find enjoyment in it, that's fantastic, but it definitely doesn't do very much for me.